Hi, everyone. Welcome to Remake's April community call and happy Earth Month to you all. As we get settled, drop in the chat where you're calling from. I love seeing how global these calls can get. I'm in Brooklyn right now. It is a very rainy New York City afternoon. It's 12 p.m. Eastern time for me. I'd love to see where everyone else is calling in from. So drop in the chat. Before we get started, I want to just talk more about some recent events. Before we get started, we're at Remake deeply concerned about the US imposing tariffs exceeding 40% on nations like Myanmar, where garment production is a vital lifeline for millions. In 2024 alone, Myanmar earned over $3.1 billion from finished garment exports, which are all jobs that are now at risk. These tariffs come at a time when the country is reeling from a very devastating 7.7 magnitude earthquake that killed over 4,000 people and compounding the crisis for garment workers and their families. So I just wanted to share with everyone today that our partners at the Asia Floor Wage Alliance have asked us to donate earthquake relief efforts in Myanmar. We're dropping the link in the chat here. Workers and activists on the ground need our support more than ever. So if you have the capacity to donate via this link, share with your networks, or if you're interested in hosting a fundraiser for the Myanmar relief, always reach out to us at Remake. We're happy to hear your ideas and how we can all get involved and make a difference together. So thank you all for coming in. As we have more folks joining, in celebration of Earth Month and Earth Day, today's call is going to focus on showing you all examples of what people are doing around the world to combat the climate crisis and how we can get involved at the local level. So today we're going to center climate education in action and highlight some global perspectives. As we come together this month to recognize the importance of advocating for our planet, we're reminded that each action, no matter how big or small, has a very lasting impact. Earth Month is not just about raising awareness, but also taking real, meaningful steps toward a better future. And what better way to explore this than through today's conversation on climate action. I'm so excited for you to get to know our speakers today and for our speakers to get to know you. For our celebration this year, we are bringing together 3 exceptional voices in the environmental education space. Today with us, we have Daniel Drak, Soleil Sabalja, and Andrea Sofronia. Daniel is the Assistant Professor of Fashion Management and Social Justice and Director of the MPS Fashion Management program at Parsons. Their work champions inclusive, future-facing approaches to fashion while questioning the social and ecological impacts of emerging technologies. Soleil is with us today. She is a science and climate educator to high schoolers in New York City. She is her school's sustainability coordinator and co-advisor of their green team. When she's not at work, Soleil continues to advocate for the protection of the environment by hosting free stores with her grassroots community group, Nasty New Yorkers. She's currently getting her second master's degree in environmental conservation education from NYU, so she can further her goal of working with youth on climate solutions. And next we have Andrea, who is the co-owner and project manager at Redo, a social enterprise in Romania dedicated to repurposing garment waste from local clothing and textile factories into sustainable products. An artist by education and a designer by profession, Andrea brings a diverse and multidisciplinary approach to social entrepreneurship with a deep commitment to environmental responsibility and circular economy principles. I'm so excited to get into this conversation. I encourage you all to engage with the panelists throughout this chat. Be dropping your questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout the discussion, and we'll do a Q&A at the end where you could also come off mute. So thank you again for being here and your commitment just present in the space that we have today for building a more human-centered world. So let's get started. To kick things off, I would love for each of our panelists to share with us what inspired you to become an advocate for change. Let's start with Daniel, Soleil, and then Andrea. What's inspired you?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for creating the space for today. I love this question because I always want to find out sort of what was that spark for folks. And for me, it's sort of this belief that fashion is really more about power, expression, and identity than it is just about clothes. And as somebody who's queer and neurodivergent, I saw how fashion could be a space to give voice to those who have been traditionally excluded from a lot of different spaces and systems in the world. And as a queer educator, it's like, how can I bring that to our students, right? Who are the future of this industry, the future of the world. But I've also seen how things like digital tools, specifically in the fashion space, if they're adopted uncritically, they can replicate old systems of exclusion, of waste, invisibility, especially now as AI is on the scene and really amplifying a lot of that. So really, it's not about just being an advocate for change, but this idea about being an advocate for intentional change, where if we're shaping these technologies, we want to make sure that we maintain justice at their core. Otherwise, they're going to be shaped by the same biases that have shaped every other system that we're still dealing with. So it's not just about innovation, but it's about liberation vis-a-vis this technology. So really thinking about what has sparked my sort of passion for advocacy here, it's about disruption, right? Disruptions of systems, making sure that as we grow into these digital spaces that we're not replicating, but we're rebuilding and being very intentional, inclusive, and doing that with a lot of care.
Beautiful. Thank you for being here. Soleil, if you want to share next, what
Hi,
inspired
everyone.
you to become an advocate for change?
So for me as a high school teacher, I usually spend my summers traveling and exploring. For all of July and August, I'm usually traveling to different beaches. And the one thing besides relaxation that I always have at the beaches tends to be microplastics and trash, unfortunately. And so um, I guess my love for beaches and protecting the beaches was really where all of my advocacy work kind of started from and spurred from. Um, so going to these beaches, having an amazing time, but then having these opportunities to come back and kind of think about, all right, well, how can I continue this work? Because the waste doesn't just start and stop at the beach. So brought that passion back into my classroom and figured out ways to then teach my students and spread this information to friends and to a community online. Um, and so I formed my grassroots group, Nasty New Yorkers, in 2020 because there was a huge, huge, huge need in New York City at the time for community groups. The sanitation budget was cut, and a lot of community groups were coming together and starting to do community cleanups in different neighborhoods. And by no means, we know as community cleanup groups that cleanups are no solution to the climate crisis, but it is a great gateway into environmentalism. And so I did that with the community. I've done that with my students, and it's just been a great way to get people involved and more active to be able to change small behaviors in their lifestyles for a more positive impact on the environment.
And I guess that's me now. Well, it's kind of a difficult question because not difficult to answer in a way because I don't know what to pick exactly, but 0.0, I don't know, a moment for me or the person that changed was a colleague of mine that was the founder of the mother NGO that made Redu actually. Because I started volunteering there like 15 years ago, and I was not aware of everything. And slowly, I started to learn more about what our impact is on the planet, and how small things we can do to change, to lower our to make our impact maybe more positive, I would say. But I think yeah, this bunch of people from the NGO really made me because they were my educators in a way, and then by knowing how I learned things, I knew how to interact with the people that we were trying to gather up in our community and to make them understand that it's we have to do something together. So yeah, maybe it's not a very complicated answer, but it's yeah, it's what inspired me very, very much. And you know, everything, all the other changes that we see as the years pass by, and I don't know, and everything that happens around us in the nature, and the climate is changing a lot here, at least. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I could relate to what all three of you are saying with kind of like your launch point for me and a lot of our Remake change makers. It just began as a curiosity of like, who is doing this work? Does it exist? I feel that I need to make a change, and just going forward with that curiosity and seeing where it takes you in this space. So thank you. And I'd love to dive even further and explore what drives your work for each three of you. To Daniel, as a fashion educator analyzing the evolution of digital fashion as a pivotal opportunity for the industry's future, I'd love to hear your perspective on how AI and the growth of tech reliance has changed and continues to change the fashion industry.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. This is a good question because there's a lot to unpack. There's the good, the bad, the opportunities, the traumas that are possible as a result of relying on these systems. And it really is all of that. But when I think about the opportunities for things like AI in the fashion system, we need to think about there are real opportunities there, right? Where we can reduce things like overproduction, we can optimize supply chains. That's a really good thing when we think about how much waste the fashion industry has sort of perpetuated for a number of years now, right? So as we think about the capacities for AI to do that work for us and to optimize those supply chains, that's a real big positive that we can look into moving forward, as long as we continue to investigate those opportunities with strategy and obviously with a lot of care and caution as well, because we know that there's a lot of externalities that comes out of the over-reliance on those systems as we're moving forward. So I think about like last week, the big trend with like the whole Studio Ghibli imagery. Did any of you see this huge AI trend? That has a huge environmental impact, right? And as we think about the sort of implications of these systems through fashion on the planet, we cannot shy away from those facts. If we look at the sort of math behind it, you know, like this water bottle, it's about half a liter, about 18 ounces if you're not Canadian. And it takes about 4 to 10 of these to produce one image on the platform, like on ChatGPT, when we're making something like a Studio Ghibli inspired image. If we're doing that by the millions, right, there's a huge environmental impact that we're just not visibly seeing all the time. So we have to be conscious of the fact that there's so many opportunities here. There's so many cool things that the AI can do, but we really need to do more to make these sort of invisible impacts of AI more visible and more understandable to the folks who are using them, so that we can really start to mitigate what our reliance on that technology ultimately will be. We also want to think about too, in terms of the sort of labor impact, how AI is being used to surveil things like workers, automate their jobs without protections. And this then becomes another mode of extraction in the fashion industry, which we've seen for decades. And it's not about empowerment. So we really have to be intentional with that shift in terms of how we're using this technology, again, strategically in all different functions along the supply chain and the wider fashion system. But I think also we need to question what we're optimizing for. And under capitalism, of course, we're always optimizing for profit and speed. And that comes at a huge degree of harm and a huge degree of costs on the planet and on people. And if we maintain those systems, we're just going to dig deeper with regards to the inequities that we're cultivating through technology for the wider sort of purpose of fashion, so to speak. So if we can center things like sustainability initiatives, well-being of people and the planet and dignity, we can really move and steer AI towards this idea of collective benefits. But that takes policy, right? It takes intervention. It takes imagination. It needs that regulation to ensure that it's not sort of the Wild West and really gets unruly and out of control. But it's important for folks, I think, to understand that every AI request, every time we go into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever it is, that's a resource request. Every time we type into the platform and ask for feedback, there is a cost in terms of water, electricity, and labor, and it's always present behind the screen, even if we can't immediately see that impact. So it's important for us to understand that there's a ton of opportunities available to us vis-a-vis AI and sort of related technology, but there's a huge environmental and people cost that we need to mitigate and manage as well as we move ahead.
Wow. This is such a fascinating topic to me, and I see the chat is going off. I see Marissa made a comment that H&M, I did not know this, H&M launched AI models last year, which is so crazy to me. And Daniel, that visual that you just gave us is so helpful to really realize like what is going on behind the questions that you asked to ChatGPT or whatever AI like platform that you're using. There is such a human and worker cost to the side of these things. And I'm going to ask you more questions to come. But next, I want to switch to Soleil. Some of the initiatives that you have led at your school include rescuing over 2,000 pieces of food from the cafeteria to divert from landfills, collecting over 500 pounds of clothing to be distributed to migrants in need, and organizing cleanups with students, picking up over 100 pounds of trash from the streets. In addition to that, your grassroots community group, Nasty New Yorkers, held 8 free stores in the Lower East Side last year, recirculating over 12,000 pounds of clothing and shoes, which is an incredible number to community members. Your group has held over 10 community cleanups, collecting over 300 pounds of trash. I would love for you to tell us about your experience, one, educating students on the environmental care in New York City, and two, just to share some of your personal insight from your cleanups and free clothing stores.
Thank you for sharing all that. I feel like you were just my hype person. Thank you. So it's been growing and growing with time, the amount of work that I've been able to incorporate my passion of protecting the environment into the work that I do with my students. And I've even weaved it in from the program that I'm doing at NYU. So I'm currently getting my master's in environmental conservation education. So in one of the classes I took, I actually developed a curriculum on a climate justice course that I teach to seniors here at my public high school. And it's an alternative class that I teach to students who choose not to take college level science, because the only other courses offered are AP levels, which are college level classes. There's also a really great Howard University online class, but again, it's at the college level and it offers college credit. So for students who might need a little slower paced class or who might not be planning to study science in college, this is an alternative class for them. And it's been phenomenal. It's gotten really great feedback from the students. They get very engaged. So essentially what we do is we study local problems or different things that are affecting the environment. And then we zoom in locally, specifically in our school or our community, and the students have to come up with their own solutions and implement them. So for instance, the initiative that we did with rescuing food, we were studying waste systems, and I'll get more into that later. But we were studying waste systems here. So where does our food go, wasted food? Where does our recycling go? Where does our trash end up? And we actually had a friend of mine come in, Anna Sachs. Many of you guys might know her as the Trash Walker on Instagram. She does a lot of dumpster diving. She came in and she spoke to my students, and she actually inspired them to then go and do a dumpster dive in our school, right outside of our school, outside of the cafeteria. And the students found a huge bag of peaches that were getting thrown away, and they were so upset. And so that spurred their solution for creating a proposal to get a community fridge in our cafeteria, so that instead of good rescuable food getting thrown out, not even getting sent to compost. It would go straight to our community fridge, and students in our community would be able to go there and take when they're hungry all throughout the day. And so the principal loved it. The students went and they had to come up with their own PowerPoint presentation. They had to find a refrigerator that they wanted to buy. They went and they pitched it to the principal. The principal sent them to the Parents Association. They had to present at the Parents Association meeting. They got all the funding, and it's been running smoothly ever since. So that's just one example of the type of class that I've been able to set up, and some of the different things that we've been able to do. But it's really cool getting to do this educational, this type of education with my students, because we get to study a problem, and the students become experts on this problem before they go out into the field and they become climate change makers. So another one that we do, we study obviously a lot about plastics. So I brought my little jars of microplastics from everywhere I travel. I usually collect microplastics. So these are from Kenya. These are from a class trip last month. We took students to Plum Beach, which is out in Brooklyn. These microplastics are from Miami Beach. So we have microplastics literally from all over the world, and the students see that it's a problem that's not just affecting one place, it's affecting everyone everywhere. And then the students get to come up with these small actions. So we also study combined sewage overflow, which is a big thing here in New York. Our sewer system is all connected to the runoff that goes to our rivers. And so when we have heavy rain and the sewage system overflows, everything that's on the ground outside, all the trash ends up flowing directly to either the East River, the Hudson River, which then eventually goes directly to our oceans. So we do this educational component. The students become experts. They learn about it. They see different things from all over the world, and then they come up with their own solutions. So it's been really, really cool to get to see that in the classroom. And then obviously I keep that teacher spirit with me all the time. Sometimes my friends get annoyed. They're like, "Oh, you're such a teacher." But I take that into the community cleanups that I do outside as well. And I actually even have some friends here who are in this call, and they bring their kids to the community cleanups. And those kids, anytime they see me, they'll be like, "Oh, I saw some trash on the ground, but don't worry, I picked it up." And they're so proud. These kids are 4 years old, and they're out there picking up trash, and they know why they need to pick up the trash. So it's really small things like this are, we call them gateway actions, because it's really a great way to get people involved in environmentalism. It's just a start. It's not the solution to the entire climate crisis, but it really does make everybody who gets involved reanalyze the way that they're maybe consuming, the way that they're using different products, and they're able to make small changes in their lives. So thank you.
That's so remarkable. It is, what a wonderful experience that you have for your students. Like, do you have room for 1, 2, 3, like 60 more students in your classroom? So I'm sure everyone here would love to be in that environment with you, but it's so, I can't agree with you more that it really is just a small, like whether it's picking up trash on a hike or just like one small thing to really open your mind to realize, you know, how you're consuming and throwing away, and just really reevaluating what you bring in, how you spend your time and your values with everything that you consume. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And everybody, if you have any questions for Soleil and Daniel so far, feel free to drop in the chat, and then we're gonna continue to get to those at the end. So now I'd love to ask Andrea, so Redo, which means reduce in Romanian, was built by a group of activists, resulting to be the first in Romania to address waste in both an organized and entrepreneurial way, which is so interesting to me. Your ethos for this pioneering project is participation, as change can only be made through persistent education. Can you tell us your experience of working on awareness campaigns that are meant to educate the community at large on hidden environmental and social costs of fast fashion?
Sure. Yeah, it all kind of started before Redu. As I was saying, there is a mother NGO. Yeah, that's My Bine. It's for the better in English. And through My Bine, a big concern was the consumption. And of course, one of our basic needs is food. And first actions from 15 years ago were concerning food and how we consume it and how much we throw away and what we can do with it and what options are, like terms like fair trade or ecological agriculture and so on. And then after this, well, in parallel with the food events and gatherings, there was the clothes. It's another need that we have. And it started with an event, we call it Solidarity Bazaar, in which we invited people to actually donate clothes, sell them. We sold them in the event. They could swap the clothes also, and we even had a stand for free things. Yeah, so this was before Redu. After Redu started, because we had also an interest into using some clothes, into upcycling some of the clothes from the community. It was a very good event, and it was not very campaigning focused in the beginning. We were in our 20s. We liked also to have fun. And this actually gathered a lot of community and around us, because it was really cool events. And then we added some layers on it. On this event, we had in parallel a workshop on some DIY regarding clothes, like embroidery, or some people didn't know how to sew a button or do small reparations on the clothes, and upcycling then with some that wanted to learn how to sew with the sewing machine and so on. So we did this very close approach to the community, and I think that really engaged people around us. Then, of course, through Redu, it was in our interest to see, because Romania has had a lot of history with the textile industry, actually, and even Iași, the city we're in, it had a very big background, but a lot of those factories closed after the revolution in 1989, and I mean through the years, I don't know, maybe 2000 and closer to us. The pandemic almost killed the industry and so on. But we had people that could talk from the industry, that knew stories, that knew that it's hard work, that could talk about the process, because we're not very, we tend not to think about an object that we are using. We think that we take it for granted, and everything we touch had a person working on it, and you don't know at what price, because the rule we say that if the price is smaller, some people, some man or some woman paid for it with its time, with its I don't know, life, with a hard life, and that's the bad part of the industry. So yeah, that was everything grew organic, because you use that. I heard that word before we began talking today, and yeah, that was the way we took our contact and the campaigning to our community, not thinking that we're going to make some campaigning actions right now, but doing what we felt that was right to do, and liking a lot what we do, being bold sometimes on on certain topics, and bringing in front of the people what actually happens, and making them think that think about everything they consume, especially in the textile industry, because this is going crazy right now. But I think I will talk about it a bit later.
Thank you. Yeah, it really does start with the small things. Like I certainly learned through mending what I have in my closet and then joining groups that were mending in community, which definitely helped further and deepen my advocacy for sustainable fashion. I next want to ask Daniel, returning to the conversation of AI, what are the other ethical implications of AI in fashion related to DEI, for example, and catering to the diverse needs of individuals and communities, and digital platforms in general as tools for personal and collective expression?
Another great question, Holly. Thank you. Because again, I see all these opportunities, but I also see a lot of the same problems being perpetuated again and again because of AI and sort of the way that it's set up and used, at least right now. But I do think that AI and sort of similar digital technology, they are incredible tools for things like self-expression. And that's really important, I think, for a lot of individuals in their communities, particularly marginalized individuals in their communities. And I think about my own communities, like the queer, trans, disabled communities, and how they can be empowered through this kind of technology to design for them in ways that they likely wouldn't have had access to in our previous or traditional systems of fashion. So I think about how digital platforms, these kinds of systems, they're being used by people to explore their identities without the need for access to physical garments. And that can be really important. And again, a good opportunity for sustainability along the kind of supply chain, because we don't have to actually go out and build those things or buy those things. We can experiment with them in these kinds of digital realities. So we can design things that are gender affirming or that fit our bodies, knowing that our bodies are so different. Mass production typically always gets it wrong, or designing for disability. And we can prototype those designs in pixels first. And that's a huge opportunity for us, one, just democratically to have access to those kinds of designs and opportunities, but also to make sure that we can design in a way that works for users before actually going out and making the thing. And that's a big opportunity, I think, for the fashion system and for businesses as they move ahead. But ultimately, too, in the realm of ethics, I think this is where things get a little bit muddy here. We know that these generative models often default to very narrow views in terms of what it thinks people look like or the ideas that it wants to purport. And oftentimes those defaults are bodies that are white or thin or Eurocentric. And that's a huge, huge problem when we think about how these ideas are being pushed out towards users and what they're seeing as representative samples of whatever it is that they're looking for. And I know that folks like us, when we get a lot of that sort of output from AI models, can be critical, and we know when things are reductive or problematic. But I think about folks who are growing up, right? Kids who are using these systems. And if certain imagery keeps getting pushed to them, right, that will start to create their own perspective or perception about what a body should look like or the things that they should be moving towards. So that kind of idea of sort of AI to reduce those kinds of capacities is also really sort of problematic and something that we need to be really sort of mindful of as we build these systems intentionally moving forward. I also think about how, these AI models are trained on data that's oftentimes scraped without our consent or without our knowledge. And that's a huge problem as well when we think about independent designers or everyday users who really just don't know what's happening with their data. But this creates huge issues of things like ownership and privacy and exploitation. So as we think about sort of our innocent AI requests, we need to think about our data is oftentimes being given to this larger sort of corporation and can be used to train their platforms more in the future or be used for other purposes that likely we're just not aware of or not thinking of as we make those immediate requests. And I do think that AI, at least in its sort of current form, it really is about math, right? It's all math and patterns, and these are how the algorithms work. And ultimately, as a result of that, AI is oftentimes like a mirror of the world, like it reflects back what you give to it or what you put into it. And we need to think about AI sort of beyond that idea of it being a mirror, but ultimately a canvas, right? Something that we can design for the future. But again, this requires regulation. And right now it's like We are determining the ethics of AI systems in real time as things come up, and we go, is that okay? Or is that not okay? And we're all trying to collectively figure this out on the fly, and that's really hard. So we really need folks, governments, to step up, create data transparency laws, create ethics reviews, build labor protections, create public accountability, and through that raise the awareness of all of our sort of actions and how that sort of builds the system or problematizes the system and our reliance on it as we move forward. We also need to think about how we can reshape who's really controlling or designing these systems, right? A lot of the biggest sort of folks who are in charge of OpenAI and these larger platforms, they look like the same people who built Facebook and Twitter and all these other companies that have really created a lot of problems for us in the larger sort of landscape. So we need to think about how can we fund different marginalized creators to build these systems and really rethink AI in a variety of different capacities. So these systems are not centralized to the same folks who have built the same problematic systems over and over. And again, it requires a lot of intention from a lot of folks who can sort of fund and support those initiatives and really change the paradigms of power that AI is replicating now and will continue to do so into the near future.
I know of the Fashion Workers Act in New York that it will be taking effect this year, June or July, which has AI protections for models and fashion workers in it. What are some other laws or policy coming through the pipeline that you know of that where do we bring our advocacy for this?
That's such a good question because you're right, it's happening in these kind of very specific sort of locations right now. And it's also important for us to not separate sort of what's happening with AI and the development of these platforms from what's happening sort of globally in terms of politics, in terms of culture, because that's also shifting what we can and sort of can't do as we think about withdrawals from things like the Paris Agreement in one respect. And what that means in terms of how hard it is to build coalitions of governments and bodies that can really respond to these on the scale that it demands. So when we think about, again, what are the initiatives that are happening right now, to your point, Holly, like there's some powerful things, but they're few and far between. And we can also draw upon sort of what's been happening too with, the actors, right, and that strike and how a lot of that was coming out of the concerns of AI and the use of their likeness. So these kinds of battles are being fought in very different spaces right now. But again, it's not as sort of centralized, like the coalitions aren't fully there yet. And we need to continue to advocate for that as we move forward. But again, it's also a really difficult moment to do that kind of work, just given the landscape that we're up against.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying, it does just continue to change. And it's like we're keeping up with where it's going next and trying to put law into place for that. It's very difficult and takes time. Thank you for sharing that. And it really Julie had put in the chat, thank you for providing this language around what AI actually is. It is really inspiring to have you here and like talk about this, especially just personally, because I have not heard from an expert in this field, and it's so interesting to me. Next to Soleil, we have discussed your local work, and I next want to ask you about your experience abroad. You have created the Jua Scholarship, I think I'm saying that right, maybe I'm not, for a Brighter Dandora, a scholarship fund that is uplifting children who work as waste pickers in the Dandora Dumpsite in Nairobi, Kenya. Can you tell us more about your time in Kenya and fundraising to create a future where no child has to work in dangerous conditions like the landfill in order to survive?
Okay, so I originally went to Kenya for the first time last July 2024. I traveled with a different nonprofit called Water is Life to work on a clean water project in an area in Nairobi that needed access to clean water. And when the program finished, I decided to spend a few extra days just exploring Nairobi because there's really great initiatives going on. And I wanted to meet with different groups and see different projects and things that were going on. And as I mentioned before, one of the units I teach in my class is waste streams. And I like to get as much of a global perspective on the things that I teach as well. So the students don't just have this one mindset where the New York City waste system is organized, where we recycle all our plastic together, and we recycle our paper, and it all goes in the same bin, and it gets picked up by separate machines and goes to different facilities. I wanted them to understand that that's not how waste streams work everywhere in the world. And I figured it was probably best for me to go and explore while I was in Kenya, one of the landfills, so that I could bring back firsthand experiences to really explain to the students way better. And so I linked with some people on Instagram who were able to bring me to the landfill, which the landfill in Nairobi, Kenya, is actually the largest in all of East Africa and one of the top 5 in the entire African continent. And this is not, waste pickers is not unique to Kenya. It's quite common in other African countries. But waste pickers are people, for those who don't know, they're people who work, they make a living informally working in the landfill, just having bags pretty much the size of like a sack of potatoes, filling with one specific item that at the end of the day, once it's filled, they could sell that off for maybe $1, $1.50, maximum $2 type thing. And so I went with 2 former waste pickers who gave me a tour of the landfill and were explaining how everything works to me. They're amazing people. And they also work for a community group doing great, great work. And everything kind of started just by wanting to support the waste pickers with safety gear. So a lot of people were not wearing gum boots, which are the like very, very strong, impermeable material boots that are about knee high, like rain boots. And there's just like slush and mud, and obviously it's a landfill, so you can imagine it's pretty disgusting, and a lot of people are in flip-flops walking through this. So the first thing I did was try to create an initiative to see if friends on Instagram would send me just $6, because one pair of boots costs $6. So I just kind of asked friends, hey, if anybody wants to send me money, we're going to try to get some waste pickers this protective gear. And then the women started telling us, well, we really need sanitary pads. We get lots of infections. Sometimes they're using materials that have been discarded that they'll wash and then use for sanitary pads. So I went back to my Instagram, and again, I just asked, hey, if anyone wants to Venmo me $20, I'm going to work on getting women sanitary pads. And friends were sending money slowly. And by probably maybe the 4th or 5th time that I went back into the landfill to do these projects, and by the way, I was only supposed to stay in Kenya for like 5 extra days, but because of this project, I completely changed my entire trip and just wanted to go back and spend more time in Kenya to see these projects through, because I didn't feel comfortable my friends giving me money and not really seeing like what was going on with it. So I ended up staying in Kenya at this point, and I went back to the landfill probably like the 4th or 5th day that I was back at the landfill, and I started to feel a little bit more comfortable approaching people and talking with people. So I went over to some kids that were working in the landfill. They were probably 11 or 12 years old, and they were super happy. They were having a great time. They were playing. They were all together, but they should have been in school. And so I had one of my friends translate for me and talk to them and ask, like, why are you guys not in school? And that's when we found out that in order for a kid to go to a free public school in Kenya, there's all these financial barriers that exist. So the kids need to pay for a uniform. They have to be able to pay for the school lunch Monday through Friday. They have to be able to pay for specific textbooks. They have to pay for their report card, because the report card is like a book, and the book has pages and pages of skills that they're supposed to accomplish. So they have to pay for that report card book. They have to pay for every little activity. I found out that a kid got sent home from school because he didn't have 40 cents to participate in just a little drumming activity. So we kind of put this all together. We figured out by uniforms, shoes, the lunches, the books, everything kind of comes to about 125 US dollars. So again, I went back to my Instagram and was just like, hey, friends, if anybody wants to send me money, we're going to try to get these kids. It was just 4 or 5 kids that we had seen in the landfill. We're just going to try to get them in school. But so many people wanted to help that we were slowly able to get more and more. There's hundreds of kids that are working in the landfill. When I say kids younger than 15, because the older kids, once they've been out of school for a really long time, it's really, really hard to get them consistently back in. So the kids that I say that we are specifically working with are 15, 16 and under. And our youngest child is 5 years old, because the mothers have to bring their kids with them to the landfill. So the kid might not directly be working as a waste picker per se, but they are there with their mom all day in the landfill in these really bad conditions. The air quality is horrible there. I have days where I leave the landfill and I'm just blowing blood and black soot out of my nose. And that's what these little kids are growing up with daily when they're in the landfill. And so we started this project just to get the kids out of the landfill, and it felt weirdly very connected to all the work that I was doing back here, because my friends call me trashy. I'm literally always out picking up trash over here. So it just felt so connected to be supporting kids to get them out of the landfill so that they didn't have to do this kind of work. So at the moment, we have 40 kids that we've gotten out of the landfill and into school. And we've been able to create a Saturday lunch feeding program, because one thing we noticed was that the kids would go to school Monday through Friday, but then on Saturday they wouldn't have anything to eat, so they'd go back to the landfill. And so we started this program in February. We built out a small space with just sheet metal as the walls, and we have a little stone stove, literally just a few stones, and we have sticks to make the fire. And we feed kids 2 meals on Saturdays. And again, we started in February with about 52 kids coming. And this past Saturday, we had over 200 children come to eat. They were in the landfill and they came. So it's been amazing. It's been growing really big. We're working now at this point to try to turn this into a 501(c) so that we can be getting bigger corporate donations to do bigger kind of work. Our center right now is located inside on the outskirts of the landfill, and we want to move it outside so that the kids don't have to walk through the landfill to come to the center. But again, these are things that we would need a lot more donations. At the moment, we're just, again, really just friends here and there sending me $100 and to make this run. So I think also, just to mention one last thing, one of the most special things about this project was since the main focus that I went to the landfill in the first place was to teach my students about what was going on. The 2 people that I'm working with on the ground were able to do a Zoom session with my students, and they got to teach my students firsthand about what life was waste picking. These 2 people that I work with are 24 now and 35, and one stopped going to school when he was 8, and the other one stopped going to school when she was 14. And they were working in the landfill as waste pickers. So the students got to ask them questions and learn more about it. And one student was so moved and upset about what she learned. She decided when she went home that night, she's an artist, an incredible artist. She ripped off the back of her notebook, which is kind of like harder cardboard. She cut it up into strips and she drew on them to make bookmarks. She brought them to me the next day in school, and she was like, "Do you think the teachers would buy these for maybe like $5? We could sell them and try to raise money for the kids in the landfill." She ended up fundraising to make $1,000. We got 8 kids in the landfill because of this student. And so again, it's like this incredible connection of bringing these global problems and turning my students into problem solvers and action takers. And it's just been so beautiful to see. And it feels really good to do this project as an adult and to fulfill my passion, but then to be able to see it spark passion in young people is a whole nother level of excitement. So it's been amazing.
I'm speechless. I have chills. What an eye-opening experience. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Everyone in the chat is really feeling for those children and just the power of what kids, you know, when they put their passion, you give them the opportunity and you show them what they're capable of doing, like how much impact that they can make. That truly, you are creating problem solvers of the world. Thank you so much. If anybody, I want to continue to say, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I next want to bring to Andrea. You have been working in this space for such a long time now, and with Redo, you create products from pre and post consumer textiles for upcycling in the community to make items that are reused and integrated into modern pieces and textile accessories. I'm curious to know, over the years, how have you seen attitudes in Romania change towards sustainability and environmental responsibility? How has that evolved from when you first started to now?
Well, it is a big improvement. What can I say? It's people, of course, are more aware of the, I don't know, maybe they know more the vocabulary. That's my sensation. I mean, they know about sustainability, they know about fast fashion, circular economy, or circularity in design, or design zero waste, and so on. But I don't feel they feel it, you know? It's not like to the core. It's just like they just know the terms. And I don't know, meanwhile, we see that the clothing production it's skyrockets. It's like crazy. I think it's crazier than ever. The more we know, the more we are aware of the conditions that the cheap clothes are made, the more they appear. There are those crazy big brands, you know, that we all get commercials on social media and so on. And but I see how a lot of people are still buying even though they know about it. That's a paradox for me now. I understand in a way. I kind of understand, but I understood it until maybe my generation, let's say, because I mentioned earlier the communist years, which were full of scarcity and poverty in Romania, and it was then came the 90s until the 2000s, where it was a country in transition, and the economy was not very well, and it was still big differences between people and between what they could afford. So as we got closer to the 2007, when we got into EU and other brands, you know, the big brands that are everywhere in Europe, were everywhere in Europe, and we had access to them, and they were cheap clothing, cheaper than and we could afford it. And I know that everybody was hyped. And how can you tell people that didn't have too many options now that they have them? You know, maybe you should tame down your consumption. So maybe maybe that's why I have the feeling here that they know the terms, they understand it very well, but they still want to enjoy a bit, you know, the big range of possibilities. I don't know, maybe now, I don't know, we should focus on a bit on degrowth. We try to put that in our talks with the community, even though I know that degrowth, it's in opposition with the logic of the capitalist fashion, and it's still a struggle to find the means to communicate this and to get to the, I don't know, to the soul, because the people react more with the soul than with the heart, you know, than with with their minds. And it's still we have to find the I don't to find an equilibrium into how to make this change, because it seems to be more difficult now than it was 10 years ago. The way we interact, the way we listen to each other. So it's not that easy now to have those kind of gatherings that made some change in everyone, like we did some years ago. And now it's we can't reach them. It's difficult to reach people through social media. Our community, it's there, but they need maybe something more there. I don't know the word in English, but if I'll find it out. And not to go too far away from your question, as for the role of organizations, right? I think NGOs and social enterprises and any organization that does things a bit different than the mainstream, let's say, I think it's a huge role, because NGOs, grassroots, and groups, and so on, I think we are the ones that stay close to the people. And we hear people in a way, and we create the spaces for dialogue and education and new perspectives. So I don't know, but beyond that, I know for sure that we, the NGOs, definitely for sure, represent a bridge between the civil society and policymakers, because we can go and talk to, we have the language and most of the time the means to communicate what the people actually need to be changed. And
it's so true. And I think that's going to lead right into the question that I have for the three of you now. And that is, what do you find to be, we know we have the language, we have the vote, we know what to say, we know what needs to be done. We understand that it's going to come from the top, change will be from policy. For the three of you, what do you think is the most effective way to educate the next generation around environmental stewardship? Whoever wants to take it first.
I don't mind beginning as the educator in this field exactly. I think a mandatory environmental education curriculum needs to be implemented at all ages from pre-K through college. I think that there needs to be funding for it. Of course, we're dealing with so many cuts to funding on so many different levels, but I think that if we are able to implement this mandatory curriculum, teaching kids from a young age, taking them outside, showing them to love the environment, to love nature, to have green trees, to learn how to plant, to understand where their food is coming from, to see these different kinds of things at all ages. They could start doing that when they're 3 years old, and they'll still have fun doing that when they're 18, because my kids love going out to the garden and planting. But I think the more exposure that we're able to get kids outside, get them loving nature, they'll want to protect it more. Just my take on it.
I can jump in there. I think those are really great points. And I think throughout that sort of educational journey, all that we can do to empower students and youth with criticality is really important as we move forward, and noting how important it is really at every stage of the educational journey and beyond, right? That kind of life learning too, that goes beyond just educational institutions. But really thinking about sustainability and teaching this to students as systems thinking is really important, right? To think about how this connects to literally everything that they're experiencing in their lives in some way, shape, or form. So I want them to think about too how, all of these sustainability efforts, all these things that we're tooling them with, that they're a part of these larger systems at play. And when it comes to things like colonial systems, colonial supply chains, algorithmic biases, labor displacement, and all of these are the results, the externalities, the impacts of the actions that we're taking and the systems that we're using. So by being able to, again, make that really visible to those folks who are still learning these systems and still trying to wrap their head around the world is really important, so that they can make really critical decisions, either in their personal lives or their professional lives. And through that work, turn them into critical designers, right? Who are going to make very intentional strategic decisions, knowing what the impacts of those decisions will be, and really affirming that there will always be an impact, and that we need them to understand the good, the bad, and all the sort of gray that happens in between as they're making those decisions, so that they can make the most proactive ones possible. So really, I think, again, it's connecting those design tools to the grid in some capacity, letting them know that when they're designing in a digital or traditional capacity, that there's impact on global water use, there's impact on fiber farmers, there's impact on microchip makers, that all of these systems are at play in all the decisions that we're making in fashion too, right? And I think a lot of people just think of fashion as this fun space to play, and it is, but it's connected to so many important things and systems that we have to be really, really, truly mindful about as we move forward. So I think that educational tool is the most important, and really enabling our students to learn by using those systems and building with those systems. And by virtue of building with them, also understanding the cost that's involved. That's really, really important that we shed the light on that.
Thank you. And Andrea, what have you experienced to be the most effective way to educate your community?
The most effective, I think, it's reconnecting the people with their hands.
Yep.
Actually, because we're a bit disconnected. We need to, I don't know, we have been kind of detached from the manual work. And I don't know, technology, and Daniel presented a lot of the impact of the technology and AI. And although it gives us incredible comfort, it also seems that it leaves us more anxious. So maybe, I don't know, there's peace to be found in the process of creating. That's definitely, because I know, and we all know the beauty of making something. So I think, yeah, thinking also of the young people and the younger generation. I think we need to reconnect, not only us, but help them reconnect or learn slowness and how to slow down a bit, and how to, I don't know, do something with your hands, like, I don't know, sew, make something good to eat, play with paper or whatever. Find a passion that doesn't need a screen or a phone or a tool that's an online tool, which are good and helpful, but I don't think we, and Daniel said it, we know how to use them. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Thank you. Clapping it out for our speakers. Thank you, Andrea, Soleil, and Daniel, for being here today. I'm just so grateful that we could be together on this call today. I hope you all learned a lot. Keep supporting the advocates making change, not just this month, but every day. And I'll just leave you all by saying Happy Earth Month, and I am wishing you a grounding and uplifting month ahead, filled with community and joy. And we'll send a recap after the call today, so you can keep in touch with our speakers, and we will see you in May. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Happy
Bye.
Earth Month. Bye.
Bye.